If you thought I couldn't possibly have more to say about book game assets, you were wrong, because today we're making more book game assets for House Flipper. In this video, I'll be creating a whole new color palette for these books and designing the covers with text and embellishments to make them look more like vintage folk fairy tale books. I'll share with you my process and my workflow for how I textured these game assets so that they can be easily edited to create multiple texture variations. And I'll share how I designed these covers in Figma. As always, the link to download these assets for your House Flipper game will be in the video description. So last week I made a video about how I 3D modeled these 4 sets of books in Blender and turned them into game assets to create a dreamy bookshelf in House Flipper. And at the time, I meant to create more variations of these assets with different colors and designs on the covers, but I didn't get a chance to. And after uploading these assets to the Steam Workshop and sharing them with the House Flipper community, somebody requested that I make these books in another color palette for them. So that's what we're going to do this week. So let's start with creating the cover designs. My vision is to design these book covers to look like vintage folk storybooks. So I wanted to use book titles that feature some of the classic fables and fairy tales. Overall, I still wanted to keep my vision from last week, which was to give these books neutral and tonal colors, and I wanted to keep the designs fairly simple. But since these are older looking books, I need to include at least a little bit of intricacy in the designs. I also want to ensure that these book stacks have a collected look, with books in all different sizes and designs, rather than all of the books looking the same like from a box set. So I wanted each book to have its own unique look, but I still want to keep some cohesion between the designs. So let's open up the stacks of books that we made last week and check out the assets that we're working with. So everything's already modeled and UV unwrapped, and all of the UV islands have been arranged so that all of the books from one stack fit together on one UV map. And then for each stack of books, we baked one diffuse map, which has the color data, and one normal map, which has the fabric texture looking data. And so when you combine those 2 maps together, you get a material that looks like a fabric book cover. So to get started, I gathered the diffuse maps from each of the models, and I also exported the UV layouts of each of the models. And I pulled them both into Figma, which is a web application for interface design. It's free and collaborative, and it's one of my go-tos for visual organization. And I placed the UV layouts on top of the diffuse maps so that I could see exactly where my UV islands were placed so that I knew where the boundaries of my covers were. For the text, I gathered the book titles I wanted to use, chose fonts and colors for the text that I thought would suit the look that I'm going for, and then I got to designing. For the designs, I found some SVGs and pulled them in to create some of the more intricate details. I also found little SVG icons for the duck, wolf, and bread icons that go along with the different stories, so I could use those on the book covers. And I also used Figma's pen tool to create a simple lace or lattice looking detail. I just duplicated it a bunch of times, layered it over itself, and stretched it so that I could get the look that I wanted. And I created some border designs with that to add some extra detail. For each of the books, I kind of wanted them to have a little bit of a theme, so I gave the princessy titles more delicate and intricate look. And then I gave the other titles more hard lines and like gold details for a contrasting look. Some of the front and back covers wouldn't be showing as they were nestled inside of the book stacks, so I only designed the parts of the book that were exposed on the model. And I chose to place my favorite designs on the edges of the book stacks where you could really see them. I also tried to reuse some of the elements that I was designing with just to make it easier on myself, but also so that I could create somewhat of a cohesive look between the book stacks. But I also mixed and matched some of the elements that I could try to create a bit of uniqueness between each of the covers. I also decided that I didn't really need to edit the paper texture since I painted it last week and it's working out okay. So here are the final designs. We have the princess and the pea, and Jack and the Beanstalk with a font that has leaves through it, which kind of reminded me of the beanstalk. We have the lion and the mouse with some regal looking stars for the lion. We have the gingerbread man on a book color that reminds me a lot of gingerbread cookies. We have the ugly duckling with these cute little duck icons, the little red hen, and Goldilocks and the 3 bears. On the last 2 designs, we have Hansel and Gretel with this little bread icon, Little Red Riding Hood with the wolf icon, the fisherman and his wife, the town mouse and the country mouse, and I tried to create a little bit of a country fence detail on the book cover. Sleeping Beauty and Rapunzel, both with very intricate and delicate designs. Pinocchio, The Little Mermaid, Puss in Boots and the Frog Prince, and then Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, and Cinderella, giving the Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella some more intricate looking designs. Once I was happy with the colors, I saved it as a new diffuse map and went back to Blender. I replaced the old color textures with the new ones that we just created and tested out the new designs on the models just to make sure that everything was evenly placed and nothing was wonky. And this took several tries and a little bit of pixel pushing, but I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. I had to look up the fables for this project, and it was kind of a blast from the past. I feel like some of the old fables have pretty important themes or lessons in them, but some of them are pretty savage. I'm sure I forgot a few important ones on here. Though I'm curious, do you recognize all of these titles? Are any of your favorites on here? I think my favorite story has to be maybe The Ugly Duckling. To me, it's a story about finding where you belong and finding out that you were in fact not defective this whole time. You were just in the wrong place with the wrong people, and that's just beautiful to me. So the fable designs were done, and then I created the other version of these books that a player requested. The request was for another set of books in the colors Sage, Cream, and Black. So I put together a color palette using a couple of cool toned sage colors, one light and one a little bit darker, as well as a couple of creamy colors. And then for the black, I just used a very dark gray-green. So this one's pretty simple. I opened up texture painting in Blender and just used the paint bucket tool to replace the colors of each of the book covers. When I baked these textures last week, I made sure that I created separation between the UV islands just to make this process easier. If the UV islands had been touching more, I think it wouldn't have been as easy to change the colors. I probably would have had to go in with a paintbrush and actually paint the different areas rather than just quickly using the paint bucket tool. So I went through the stacks of books and applied the colors from my color palette onto the books in Sage, Cream, and Black. And I chose to do this in Blender instead of in an external painting tool so that I could more easily see which book corresponded to which UV island, and also so that I could see how the different colors on the books looked together. Another way to achieve this would have been to create a texture atlas where you can create a bunch of swatches on one texture and then just assign the UV islands to each of the colors. I used a texture atlas when creating the retro phone game asset in another video. When I was done, I headed over to Unity and I pulled in the new diffuse maps that we just created and replaced them on the models. And I was able to use the same models and normal maps that we created last week, since the placement of these books on these textures aren't changing or being moved around. And as you can see, it's very simple to switch between textures. Then I uploaded these models to the Steam Workshop and tested them in-game. I went back to the house after the flood, which is the house that has the bookshelf we decorated in the last video. And I replaced some of the neutral colored books with the new books with the Fable cover designs on them. I think that these covers came out pretty much how I wanted them to, and I like how they're all quite different and unique, but they're still quite neutral, and they seem to all go together in a stack. And now to test the other books we created with the other color palette. So this is the modern house in House Flipper, and I actually really like this house. It's still a work in progress. I redid the entire floor plan, and I'm still working on furnishing all of the spaces. But I think we can test out these models in the main bedroom bathroom suite area, which is actually right when you walk in. The color palette of this room is pretty grayscale. There is a lot of black, gray, and white. On the way out of this room, you pass a shelving unit that leads into the main hallway of the house. And I've been meaning to decorate it, but I think this would be a good spot to place some of these books and kind of test them out on a bookshelf. So I'm just going to place down all 4 of the different stacks of books, and then I'm going to add a few other items like a candle and a plant and a couple of sculptural details and this little rose inside of a glass case that has lights inside of it. I think bookshelves can always use some extra ambient lighting, but in real life, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to place lit candles in shelving units because the shelf above can get pretty hot. I think it came out okay, and I think these books work here in this spot in this house. I think this is a nice color palette that user requested. I did let them know that these books are uploaded to the Steam Workshop, and they said that they liked them. You can find these assets in my Steam workshop and any others that I've created for House Flipper. Let me know if there's any models you'd like for me to create for House Flipper. You can also check out the House Flipper official Discord and leave your requests in the workshop ideas channel, and somebody might create your items in game. You can find other videos on my channel about creating 3D models as well as game assets for House Flipper, and be sure to subscribe to see more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.